you looking to sharpen your budgeting skills? You're in the right place. Welcome to the Budget Couple Podcast, where we talk about life, family, and how to afford it. And now, the Budget Couple themselves, Nate and Danielle.
Welcome to the Budget Couple Podcast. I'm Nate.
And I'm Danielle.
And on this episode, we're going to go ahead and answer 2 listener questions about budgeting, how we handle cash flow, and a couple other questions related to those items. But before we dive into it, we just want to thank those of you that have left reviews. And if you haven't already, please go ahead and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or your podcast player of choice. It helps grow the show and bring us more questions, which brings us more content as well. And also, if you haven't, the best way to help us grow the show and to get more content available to you is to tell somebody. If you haven't already told somebody about the show, just let them know about it, and we would greatly appreciate that. So with that said, let's move on to today's content with our first listener question.
So our first question is a short one, but a good one. So this listener is asking about whether or not we have always used credit cards. If you've listened to the show, you know we like to. So they're asking if we've always done that, especially when it comes to paying some of our more regular bills. And also how we manage cash flow throughout the month. So if you're waiting for a paycheck to come in so you can pay for something, in other words, how do you handle that type of budgeting? So we thought about this a little bit and have a couple responses to start us off.
Absolutely. To begin with, yes, we use credit cards for all expenses that we can use credit cards for. We have a couple we can't, like certain utilities don't let us use it without an additional fee, which we're not going to pay. Our trash doesn't let us use it without an additional fee. So there's a couple of them that we don't use it for, but pretty much everything else, minus mortgage and a couple of utilities, we use our credit cards for. And the reason we do that is not because like we're addicted to credit cards or anything like that. We like getting the points. We automatically earn between 1% and 4% on any money we spend on our credit card. So if we spend $100, we get between $2 and $4 back. Whereas if we took that money directly out of our checking account, we wouldn't get that extra money. It's not a lot, but over the course of the year, it is income that helps us be able to afford different things.
Yeah, it's a nice bonus. It's usually several $100s throughout the year. And so, we thought, why not? I wouldn't recommend just using credit cards for everything if you're not good at sticking to a budget, though. And this kind of gets to the other part of the question with cash flow. We set a budget, and it's a monthly budget. And so we know what all of our income is going to be throughout the month. We know exactly what, at the end of that month, on the 30th, 31st, whatever, we know how much money we're going to have in our bank account. And that doesn't really change. And thankfully, we don't have like a fluid income. It's just always the same. But we have been paying everything on our credit cards. So we haven't been using debit at all throughout the year, throughout the month, sorry. We've just been using our credit cards throughout the month. So we know what that credit card is going to be, though. We're not just, spending it on whatever we want. We are recording everything that we're spending on the credit card on our budgets. And so we stick within those guidelines. And by the end of the month, we know exactly how much we have on those credit cards. So we know that we can pay them off completely each month.
Yeah, we basically treat our credit cards as a place to offload how much we have to pay. It basically collects all of the money that we owe over the course of the month. And then our checking account is where all of our paychecks go. So that goes ahead and builds up all the money that we have. And then at the end of every month, we reconcile those accounts, making sure that all the debts that we had for that month are paid off and that we have money in our checking account to satisfy them. So basically, we use credit cards as a place to consolidate debt into one payment a month. And then our income goes into checking, where it just kind of pays for all the stuff that we have. It may or may not be the best way to do it, but it's always worked for us. And that's the way that we found we like to handle our finances.
And again, this is really because we write a budget, we stick to it, we're comfortable with our use of credit cards. They don't tempt us to go further. But if you have any of those issues where you haven't developed a budget or you are tempted by credit cards, it might not be the best way for you to deal with money, so this is what we do, but it might not be the best for everyone. So think about what works for you. But that's why we don't really have to worry about cash flow throughout the month, because we just simply have our budget. We know what's coming in, what's going out, and we deal with it. We balance it essentially at the end of the month.
Yeah, basically the only thing that comes into our bank account during the course of the month is income. And the only thing that goes out is at the end of the month, one time. We do everything on like the last day of the month usually, and we pay all of our debts. So it's a really easy way for us to kind of keep a gate check on what's going on.
So thank you for that question. It was short, but it was good, and it allowed us to talk about a couple points that we haven't talked about in a little bit. So the second listener question is a bit longer and more detailed, so I do want to read it so you guys have the numbers and the information going into this. My husband and I are still working on sticking to a budget, but we're paying off our last bit of consumer debt this month. He has a small emergency savings fund, and I have 3 CDs of varying lengths, so I'm not tempted to pull from savings. We're 2 years into a 30-year mortgage, and I currently pay $200 extra toward the principal each month. For the first year, I only paid $75. I would like our next financial goal to be saving 3 to 6 months of expenses. However, we also pay $95 in PMI each month, which will fall off after 10 years or once that 20% is paid. Should we focus more on savings or working on paying down the mortgage to save on the PMI and the interest? And their interest rate is currently 3.85% on the house.
Okay, so first off, number one, it sounds like you have a budget set up, ready to go, that's working for you because you know your numbers, you know where you're able to put extra money and all that. That's a really important first step. And it sounds like you and your spouse also have a plan of what you want to do. So all around good work there. So let's go ahead and take a look at where we're going from there and what we would do if we were in your circumstance, getting all that stuff there. So it's great to have extra money left over at the end of every month to put towards something. For us personally, I don't think we'd be putting it over onto the house if we didn't have our emergency fund fully set up. The reason for that is if you have an emergency come up, you need that money immediately. And if you don't have an emergency fund that's large enough, you're going to have to either borrow or pull off or go into consumer debt, which are all things you want to avoid. So we really like having a fully funded emergency fund. As you said, 3 to 6 months worth of expenses is right around where you should be. And also the amount of money that you're technically losing, I'm doing air quotes here, even though you can't see, to PMI and interest by not paying that extra $200 a month is very, very tiny in the grand scheme of things. It's not going to be a real noticeable thing that you're losing out on. So I wouldn't worry about that. And I don't think we would really advocate for putting more money on the house. What we would do is put all that money into a savings account before we got going on anything else.
Yeah, so you said your husband has a small emergency fund set up already. Go ahead and add to that until you guys have that 3 to 6 months set aside. That should come first before everything. We wouldn't put any extra on a principal in our house until we have a solid emergency fund, and also until we are able to put 15% onto our retirement accounts, or at least take advantage of any matches that your employers have. So those would all be things that come first for us before putting extra on the house, as great as it is. So that would be our strategy. And so we would go ahead, take off that 200, start putting it towards an emergency fund. And those CDs, when they run their course and you're able to cash them out, put that into your emergency fund if you're still not quite there yet. If you are there and you have your retirement at 15%, then go ahead and put that money on the house. That's a great thing to do with it. We love to put extra on the house. So, it's a good thing, but I would wait and make sure you have emergency fund and retirement set first.
Right. And one other note that we wanted to talk about is using CDs as a savings vehicle, basically making sure that you have the money there, but you can't spend it. That's, in our opinion, I think a little bit of a dangerous way to move things because your money's not liquid. In that sense, you can't really pull it out without either incurring a fee, a penalty, a waiting period. Something's going to happen where you don't have access to your money immediately. And if it's a true emergency, you're going to need that money usually pretty quick. So I wouldn't go and put a lot of money in CDs. You mentioned that it helps you not spend it. But if you just treat your savings account as a place where it's just where money goes to sit for a while, if you get your mindset around that, it's not as hard as what it could be otherwise. Also, take a look at banks and see what other things are doing. We currently bank at Capital One because our money in savings earns 2% interest there, just sitting there. We don't have to do anything. It earns 2% interest. And I did some research, and the best CD that I could find was for roughly about 2 years, and it was 2.4% interest. So if you're looking at it that way, you're really losing out on less than 0.5% interest, and you have the immediate benefits of having that money available to you. So we're personally not big fans of using CDs as a savings vehicle for your emergency fund. Now, if it's something that you're saving for, let's say, a car or for a longer term expense that you need to save up money for, it might be a really good option because you can put it away. You can earn a little bit better interest than what you would at the bank, but you can kind of go through and get that set up. That's kind of where our mindset's at on that.
Yeah, I mean, it is, like Nate said, it could be a good vehicle for a bigger expense that you're saving for. And this is a great way to cash flow something. Just toss everything into a CD and you can't touch it for 1 year, 2 years, or whatever. And so that savings isn't going to be touched, and you can pull it when you need it, once the life cycle ends on it, and you have all that money for your new car or your new kitchen or whatever it may be. And so it is a really good way to cash flow things, especially if you have trouble with pulling from savings. But it is really important that your emergency fund is something you can get to immediately without any fees or hassle. So that's a super important, that's a important aspect of an emergency fund, at least in our opinion.
Wholeheartedly agree. And just to fully back up here, if you're not on board with what a CD is money that you give to a bank for a certain period of time, and they give you a guaranteed interest rate on it. So let's say I put $5,000 and they give me, for the easiest of math, we're going to say a 10% interest rate. That means after that period of time, let's say it's a year, I'm going to get my $5,000 plus another $500 because it's a 10% interest rate. So I'd get $5,500 back in that case. Now, no CD is anywhere close to that. Most CDs are in the low 2% area. And depending on the length of it, that may be more, maybe less, but that's kind of the average right now in towards the end of 2019 here. But that's basically what a CD does. And essentially you agree to give the bank money for a certain period of time. They give you a set amount of interest, and you really can't touch that money without incurring fees or penalties, which totally negate the advantage that they have of the interest rate. So that's kind of a background on CDs. They can be good. I had one when I was in high school. The interest rates were significantly better at that period of time, but it was an easy way for me to be able to go ahead and just lock away money so I wasn't a dumb teenager, because I was a dumb teenager. So we had those things set up. But hopefully that answers your question fully of how we would approach that. And again, any of the names we mentioned, like we bank with Capital One, but that's not the only one that has high or relatively high interest rate savings accounts. There's plenty of them out there. You just need to do a little bit of research, but they're the ones that we chose because they're also have a number of local banks to us. But I think that's going to wrap it up for today. Do you have anything else, Danielle?
No, I think we're good. Thank you guys for the questions. They're good. They're interesting, and we love thinking about it.
Yeah, we have a ton of questions still to answer, so we apologize if we have not gotten to you. We're moving through the backlog. But if you do have questions, please shoot us an email by going to budgetcouple.com, click on the contact form, and we will get back in contact with you either through email or here on the digital airwaves to answer your question. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Budget Couple Podcast with your hosts, Nate and Danielle. For more great content and to stay up to date, visit budgetcouple.com. Make sure to check out the next episode of the Budget Couple Podcast, where we'll talk more about life, family, and how to afford it. We'll catch you next time.